Hey guys, it's Daniel. The following is from Nancy McCallum, Layne Staley's mother, where she discusses Layne Staley's addiction and in particular how she feels much more could have been done to help save her son's life. Later in this video, I'm going to show you the location where Layne Staley passed away. In the meantime, here's the Nancy McCallum quote. This quote is from the book Grunge is Dead. Quote, "If you've ever loved an addict that relapses, you trust your love for them, but you never trust the power of that drug on their brain chemistry. You never trust the treatment center if they don't address relapse. I once asked a treatment center counselor on Family Day, what about relapse? What have patients been taught about it? And as a family, what should we do? The counselor looked at me and said, oh, our students never relapse. I knew that we had wasted our time and money. My heart just sank. I felt so horrible for Layne because here I was, his logical, practical, upfront mom who had asked the question that nobody wanted to ask. I felt as though with all the parents, loved ones, and families surrounding these young people, they would give us a number or a counselor we could call in case we were worried. I was so blind and naive. In a way, it was like the drug had a spokesperson right there in that room, and it was the counselor. It was sickening. When Layne went to Hazelden Treatment Center, had he stayed longer and been able to build long-term friendships and sponsors, I believe Layne would have had a chance. Kurt Cobain said it would take 3 years for him to have a solid new start, and I believe he was correct. But Layne became addicted to drugs when he was quite young, and he never really learned mature problem solving. He just didn't have the wisdom you get over a period of years. Some of the people around Layne were wonderful, sweet-hearted, and professional, and truly had his interests at heart. A young person who is drug addicted can't help bumping up against sleazy people in the entertainment industry. Not necessarily the professionals, but others down the line. You can't stay clean and sober without clean and sober people around you, without a bodyguard mentality. Layne would have had to have been superhuman. Nobody expected him to be that. It takes walking away for a long period of time with the support of the music industry, i.e., had he stayed at Hazelden. Layne told me, Mom, I have a contract to fulfill. There are over 40 people on the payroll, and they all count on me being out there. That's where he was coming from. That he had a responsibility to the contract and his people. We need a humane society for musicians. The murderous conditions of the partnership between the drug community and the entertainment industry, anyone that supports it at any level is part of every drug death. It starts with the guy at the top who's making how many millions of dollars importing it and getting it into the country. I'd like that guy to sit across knee to knee with Layne and explain to him his rationale. I would say that Layne's form of addiction was aggressive. If it was a cancer, you sure wouldn't say, well, you've got 2 more albums to complete. All these people are on your payroll. I use this analogy. Some people try recreational drugs and it acts as a single unbarred hook. It's in, it slips out, and they walk away. Some people try recreational drugs and they get hooked. It's a single hook with a barb. They're still able to slip free. Some people get hooked with a double barbed hook, and over time, it does tremendous damage. Some people get hooked with a triple barbed hook, and there is not flipping that thing free. And the longer it's in there, without some outside help to extricate it, the more inevitable and severe the damage is. That fish is going to die. Every disease is like that. Some people get cancer. They discover it early, the treatment works, and it's rather non-invasive. Depending on the degree of the cancer and the kind of cancer, sometimes it's treatable, sometimes it's not. Sometimes it goes into remission. Sometimes it spreads to other parts of the body. Drug addiction comes in all different degrees, and in Layne's case, it was a death grip. He needed to be cut loose from his financial responsibilities in order to get the help he required, and it needed to be mandated. Because of the way the laws are written, you can intervene with a meeting, but you can't make an addict get help. That law was written so that someone's estate can't be appropriated unless you can prove that they can't tend their business. It's almost impossible to probe because there are all degrees of sanity, and some of it borders on insanity. What kept us from helping Layne was the same law that protected his estate. Sadly, one is a human life being treated the same as accumulated goods. These cases need to be handled on an individual basis. We were not able to help our son. When you're using drugs, you're not an adult making adult decisions. The drug is thinking for you. Its fangs are a death grip. I didn't believe that I would be doing much good poking away at him. Layne, you've got to do this and you've got to do that. I was trying to stay really close in my thoughts and conversations with him. I didn't want Layne to ever feel ashamed. All of us know that there are miracles around recovery. In Alaska, I was attending 12-step meetings at an A1 and on, for the family, friends, employers, employees, and concerned others of alcoholics and addicts. I was learning a lot. I probably read 200 books on the effects and studies of alcohol, addiction, and families. I was trying to discover the key. I wanted to be a voice for the one little phrase that might be the aha for Layne. If it wasn't me, I wanted somebody to find those magic words that would bring Layne back to himself. I never lost hope that I or someone would be able to do that. I educated myself about the disease so I could talk with Layne and understand. But a non-addict can never understand. They can only accept and believe that the addict is telling the truth. An addict and a non-addict don't think the same. Their brains are wired completely differently. Only an addict can help another addict through recovery. Layne's ex-girlfriend Demry, her mother and I take solace in knowing that our children experience great love from one another and that they are no longer suffering. In order for Layne to have lived, he should have been released from his contract with great love, acceptance, and respect. And yes, there was a contract, and yes, there was a commitment. But I don't think that a person has to... He didn't sign up to go to Iraq, for goodness sake. He signed up for fun and hard work, and he gave his heart and soul and life. At some point, it was real obvious that he couldn't go on, and that he needed freedom from the commitments. Maybe, after several years of true recovery, not just cleaning up, going back out, cleaning up, going back out, maybe the band could have done what the band is doing now, with Layne still at the helm. If you're in a situation where everything you do is under the microscope, everything about your life is being planned and managed by somebody else, and that life includes dealers putting free drugs in your pocket to keep you coming back, it's hell on earth. Then people watch and wait for you to die, because they're going to sell all that stuff they stole out of your storage unit. They're going to see to it that it gets to an auction house specializing in sports and rock memorabilia, where it gets sold. Then your parents are going to have to buy it back with your hard-earned money. It's very disgusting, that tangled web that they weave. Maybe a person that's involved in that whole web of destruction thinks it's a funny, challenging game. I'd like for that person to have to sit down and talk to my son. I think Layne knew he was dying, but he didn't plan on it. He had just gotten his driver's license renewed, and he was in the middle of arts projects. I really expected that Layne would survive this ordeal. Nobody should die like that. I wish the dealers could have seen what I saw, and truly, may they be punished. Lots of fans and family members try to reassure me. People try to find the right words to say, the right thing to console and make us feel better. It's kind, and it's the right thing to do. They say things like, now he's in heaven singing in God's choir. You still have his music to listen to, or he'll live on through his music and we'll always hear his voice. I would want young people to understand that you don't have to accomplish anything huge to be loved. If Layne had chosen any other career, I couldn't have loved him more. People say, well, you have your daughters to console you. I say, you don't understand. My daughters lost their brother. It's just as profound for them, but a different loss, and I have to be there for them. When you strip away all of that, what you have left is loving someone, and Layne knew that. He once wrote on an anniversary card to us, all we need is love. This should never have happened. Layne was sacrificed. No one should be sacrificed. We should all live long, happy lives. A goal for all of us is to try and make the world a better place. When all is said and done, and all the platitudes are stripped away, and all the condolences and the gifts and the cards and everyone shares their thoughts, my child has died. I think the most important thing to remember is that no human being should be seen or treated as a commodity. People should remember him in their own way. He's a human being first. He may have represented other things, but he is a real person who needed to live and wanted to live and should never, never have suffered this horrible death. How should Layne be remembered? He didn't want to be remembered as a drug addict. He wanted to be remembered for what he created and gave to the world. Sadly, the addiction took him too soon, or he would have been able to share more of himself with us. But for me, I feel as though I'm attached to Layne, and that he's with me at every minute. How I would want others to remember him, I can't say. But I do know how I remember him, and that is every moment. This is where Layne Staley died on April 5th, 2002. Before I continue, I want to mention that this location is public domain information. There are several print sources, online articles, photos, and videos which list the address of this building, but regardless, I won't be listing the address in this video out of respect for the privacy of those living here, and I made sure not to use any shots of the building where anyone living here is visible. Layne Staley used to live here. His condo is this unit at the top corner. I want to read to you a quote from Layne Staley's mother where she describes the moment she first saw Layne Staley's body in the condo. I'll be going into detail about exactly what happened, but first, I want to start off with this quote because I find that this quote really shows the human tragedy in this all. Sometimes when it comes to famous people, it's easy to forget their humanity and to forget that the families of famous people are affected by death. Here's the quote from Layne's mother, Nancy McCallum. The police first went into Layne's condo, and then they said, I said, well, I need to go in and be with him. And they said, oh, I wouldn't do that. And I said, I can do this. I've always promised myself that if anything happened to my children, I would be there for them. And I went in and he was tiny, and I thought at first that he had made like a life-size mannequin of himself because he had lots and lots of art projects always. And I thought, somebody could have thrown that little guy over their shoulder and walked down the street and nobody would have even known that it was a real person. I sat with him for a few minutes, and I told him that I was really sorry how things had turned out, because, of course, we tried to not pressure him. We always felt like pressure would just push him to the wrong place, and he knew what he had to do. He had to go in treatment, stay in treatment, communicate with his sponsor, stay with healthy people, but the music industry doesn't afford you the time to do that. And those aren't healthy people. A lot of them are not. It was pretty tough to get cleaned up. By then, he had pretty much been secluded. So it was shocking to see my child like that. It should have turned out better. And it's been amazing how many people have expressed their love and support. Layne Staley had struggled with drug addiction for many years, and after Layne's body was examined, the official autopsy and toxicology report stated that he died from an accidental speedball overdose. A speedball is a mix of heroin and cocaine. Layne Staley weighed only 86 pounds at the time of his death, and if you factor in that he was around 6 feet tall, it really paints a dark image of how severe the drugs impacted him. In response to his death, the surviving members of Alice in Chains released the following statement. It's good to be with friends and family as we struggle to deal with this immense loss, and try to celebrate his immense life. We are looking for all the usual things: comfort, purpose, answers, something to hold on to, a way to let him go in peace. Mostly, we are feeling heartbroken over the death of our beautiful friend. He was a sweet man with a keen sense of humor and a deep sense of humanity. He was an amazing musician, an inspiration, and a comfort to so many. He made great music and gifted it to the world. We are proud to have known him, to be his friend, and to create music with him. For the past decade, Layne struggled greatly. We can only hope that he has at last found some peace. We love you, Layne, dearly, and we will miss you endlessly. One of the most tragic things about Layne's death is that he was actually dead for 2 weeks before people knew he had died. On April 17, 2002, Layne's mother, Nancy McCallum, had gone to Layne's condo, though she wasn't able to get inside. More on that shortly. She went to Layne's condo in order to let him know about the passing of Demry Parrot's brother, Demry Parrot being Layne Staley's ex-fiancé. On October 29, 1996, Demry Parrot died of a drug overdose herself. Layne had already been struggling from drug addiction for several years at this point, but the death of his fiancée only made things worse for him. In 2002, the year that Layne died, Mark Lanigan from the Screaming Trees told Rolling Stone magazine that Layne Staley, quote, never recovered from Demry's death, end quote. Layne Staley purchased this condo in April of 1997, 5 years before his death. During those last 5 years of his life, Layne became more and more reclusive, rarely leaving his condo. Alice in Chains drummer Sean Kinney recalls the following. It got to a point where he kept himself so locked up, both physically and emotionally. I kept trying to make contact. 3 times a week, like clockwork, I'd call him, but he'd never answer. Every time I was in the area, I was up in front of his place yelling for him. Even if you could get inside his building, he wasn't going to open the door. You'd phone and he wouldn't answer. You couldn't just kick the door in and grab him, though there were so many times I thought about doing that. The last time Layne recorded with Alice in Chains was in October of 1998, when the band recorded Get Born Again and Died, both of which were released in '99 as part of the Music Bank box set. Shortly after, in November of '98, Layne Staley recorded vocals for a band called Class of '99, a short-lived supergroup which also featured Stephen Perkins from Jane's Addiction, Martin Lenoble from Porno for Pyros, Tom Morello from Rage Against the Machine, and Matt Serletic, who's worked with Collective Soul, Cher, and others. The band recorded a cover of Pink Floyd's Another Brick in the Wall Part 2, which, as of the time of this recording, is the last known studio recording to feature Layne Staley on vocals. One of Layne Staley's friends has said that Layne was actually going to audition for Audioslave in 2001, but Tom Morello has since stated this is not true. In any case, with the exception of one radio interview Layne Staley took part in on July 19, 1999, with the rest of the guys from Alice in Chains, Layne Staley essentially disappeared from the public eye. Layne Staley's mother, Nancy, has said that she and Layne's family would occasionally see him from time to time. The last time Layne's mother saw him was around Valentine's Day in 2002, about 2 months before his death. Now, going back to April 17, 2002. That day, Nancy McCallum went to Layne Staley's condo in order to tell him about the death of Demery Parrot's brother, but there was no answer. 2 days later, on April 19th, Nancy McCallum got a call from Susan Silver, one of the people who managed Alice in Chains. Susan Silver informed Nancy McCallum that Layne's accountants had said no money had been withdrawn from Layne's bank account in 2 weeks. Nancy went back to the condo that day to check on Layne, but again, as was the case 2 days before, there was no answer. This is when Nancy McCallum called 911. Nancy, the police, and Jim Elmer, Layne's father, were all at the scene for this tragic day. The autopsy confirmed that Layne Staley had died 2 weeks earlier on April 5, 2002. By the time his body was found on April 19th, it had already partially decomposed. The last person to see Layne Staley alive was his friend and former Alice in Chains bandmate Mike Starr. In an interview on VH1's Celebrity Rehab, which took place in 2010, Mike Starr stated that he had spent time with Layne Staley the day before he died, which would have been April 4th. April 4th being Mike Starr's birthday. According to Mike Starr, Layne was very ill and Mike wanted to call 911, but Layne protested. Furthermore, according to Mike Starr, Layne even threatened to end their friendship if he had called 911. The two got into an argument and Mike Starr eventually stormed out of Layne's condo. Layne actually called Mike after he left and said, quote, "Not like this, don't leave like this," end quote. Layne died the following day, and Mike Starr has said that he regrets not calling 911. Layne's mother Nancy was present during the VH1 interview with Mike Starr and told him that it's not his fault that Layne died, and that no one in their family holds him accountable for Layne's death. Tragically, Mike Starr himself died on March 8, 2011 from a prescription drug overdose. The tragedy of Mike Starr's and Layne Staley's deaths are still felt by many today. With specific regards to Layne, up to this point in time I've done interviews with two people who worked in studio with Alice in Chains, Jonathan Plum and Paul Fig. Here are two clips from those interviews where they discuss Layne Staley's death.
Obviously, one of the biggest tragedies in grunge music and rock and roll in general was the passing of Layne Staley. When you heard that news, were you surprised by it, or how was your reaction to that news?
Well, I mean, that unfortunately, that's happened way too many times here at London Bridge. I mean, to go through the list, Andrew Wood, Layne Staley, Shannon Hoon, Chris Cornell, it's kind of hard to talk about because it's so much of our history. It's a lot of my history, and these folks were just so brilliant, and I guess I look at it like we wouldn't have that music had they not been suffering what they were suffering with, that led them to do what they did, whatever it was, their decision or their lifestyle, whatever it was that brought them to an end. Their music represented that struggle, and that we all feel that. Like when we listen to that music, we feel their struggle. We have those same struggles, so they, in some ways, I just feel like, they kind of struggled for us in a way and put those emotions, on record for us to hear and know that we're not alone. So I just think that's really profound, and it still lives on. I think it's still, I love seeing new generation kids in their 16, 17-year-olds identifying with Alice in Chains, that are now 20. It's not their genre or age, but they're hearing something in that music that's meaningful, because it is meaningful, because that band and those people were struggling with life, just like we all struggle with life. So sorry to circle back around to your question.
That was a great answer.
Yeah, Layne. We all knew Layne was not doing well at that point, so it didn't come to a surprise. It didn't come to us in Seattle as a surprise. I think it was sad. We all were disappointed that it was heading that way already. So I guess it wasn't a surprise. It's I was heartbroken then, and I'm still heartbroken. But I love that he put that music down for us. He left us a huge gift.
Do you remember what your last interaction was with Layne?
It was so long ago. I mean, so probably my last interaction with Layne was here doing, well, I guess it probably would have been, my last strong memory was doing Jar of Flies, and unfortunately, I can't remember which song it was, but it was that Distorted Story where he was singing on the mic and it was distorted and clipping, and Toby was just like, that's it, we're keeping it. And I remember we asked Layne to re-sing something at one point, and Layne was just like, nope, I'm not doing it. You got your take. And he walked out of the room. It's like,
friggin' rock star.
That's Layne, man. And we went back, and it was like, no, that was the take. You know, he knew. That's the way I'd like to remember Layne, yeah.
Is there any one Alice in Chains song in particular that has a special meaning for you?
Well, I'd say Jar of Flies in general, just because I was here for the whole thing. It's funny, when you work on it, you develop your own connection to each song. And I feel like I have my own unique experience of that record because I got to work on a lot of it. I was really young. It's kind of a foggy memory, but I don't know. Each of those songs, I guess I can remember little moments, you know, the band being around, and I'm really thankful that I get to have, you know, and not everyone in the world gets to, you know, be in the room when an album like that's being made. So I feel really blessed to get to associate to that record in a really special way.
The first Alice in Chains record you worked on, Black Gives Way to Blue, was also the first Alice in Chains record the band had worked on since Layne's passing. So, you know, with that said, was there any sort of uncomfortable feeling for the band being in the studio without Layne?
You know, that record, to me, I think, was their cathartic, you know, release. They did that, you know, the last song on the record, Black Gives Way to Blue, is their goodbye, you know, letter to Layne. And, you know, if you listen to, you know, the first song, All Secrets Known, that's kind of sets the tone for the whole thing. And it wasn't until everybody was, you know, throughout the whole record, everyone was all gung-ho. They were really excited. Everything was sounding great. They were glad to be in the studio doing Alice in Chains again. You know, Will comes in, he's fresh new energy, and, you know, it was really fun. When we were tracking vocals for the song Black Gives Way to Blue, that's when things got really emotional. And, you know, everybody had to kind of take a break and let things settle for a second, you know, just thinking about it that day. It was really, you know, everybody felt Layne on that song, particularly tracking it.
And I can imagine for William, I mean, that was his first go with Alice in Chains. Do you know, it must have been big shoes for him to fill. How did he feel personally, do you know?
I mean, you know, Will is highly intelligent and seriously talented singer. I mean, his range is so, you know, he can get way up there, and, you know, he's got the power. You know, he knew he had big shoes to fill. I wasn't talking with him a lot about it. You know, it was like he'd come in and work with Nick on vocals. I'd be there for him if he had a guitar part, and, you know, we, you know, just trying to be there and support him because he's the new guy. You know, first it was, you know, Mike Inez, and now he's not. It's Will. But, you know, now you know, he's still there and he's still doing a great job. You know, when I watch those guys live, it's pretty impressive. You know, and you know, some people are like, oh, he's trying to sound like Layne. And to me, he doesn't sound anything like Layne. He's like the polar opposite. He's got like a bright, almost wiry voice, and, you know, he's a tall dude, and, you know, but he's got the power.
I did see him once with Will, and I loved his voice personally, and I've always thought Jerry's voice sounds closer to Layne's than Will's personally, in my opinion.
Well, I think what you're hearing is Jerry's voice on the old records under Layne, and that never went away.
So actually, yeah, you're right.
You're hearing Jerry come through just more. You know, he's stepping forward a little bit, and, you know, he's becoming a better singer. In that first record, he was actually all the way up until Black Gives Way to Blue, he was a serious smoker. Like, I'd get to the studio, we'd work, and he's got an ashtray right next to me, and he's just blowing smoke right into the back of my head, like, all day long. And I'd have to, you know, when I get home, take a shower before I went to bed because, you know, I smell like an ashtray. Devil Put Dinosaurs here, he switched over to the patch and, like, really cut back, and he could tell in his voice it was getting better and he had more control.